Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the West Lindsey series. This is one of the 9 districts of Lincolnshire and one of the county's most rural. It has 128 civil parishes. Let's see which one this episode's all about. Welcome back to West Lindsey, everybody. Now, this is one of those funny parishes where the biggest village in it is actually not the name of the parish. We're in Langworth. I'm stood next to Langworth Level Crossing, which you can see behind me, and I'll be talking about this in a minute. You can see a signal box there, there's an old station house there, and we'll be walking through Langworth. That'll be the main walk in this episode, but we're actually in the parish of Barlings. The West Lindsey series is sponsored by Gainsborough Cycles 01427 617 752. For all your cycling needs, this is your one-stop shop, located at 20 Ropery Road or online at gainsboroughcycles.com. There's a link in the description. Gainsborough Cycles, ask for Trevor Halstead. And this video is also sponsored by Jamie's Fitness Studio, based on Low Road, Grayingham, near Curtin in Lindsey. Jamie is one busy lady. Check her out by calling 07906 749 574 or emailing hello@jamies.co.uk. Online membership is available. There's a link to her Facebook page in the description. Jamie's Fitness Studio. Get fit, get happy, get healthy. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Within a narrow strip of land that runs southeast from the A158 near Lincoln, you'll find the village of Langworth, part of the larger parish of Barlings. This one is divided up into 3 main areas. First, you have the main village of Langworth, which is linear, laid out mainly along the A158. Then there's the village of Barlings, tiny in comparison, but big enough to sustain the main active religious building here. On top of that is Low Barlings, which has this one's most iconic landmark, the remains of Barlings Abbey, founded in 1154. It was a Premonstratensian abbey dedicated to St Mary, and it had its own church, the great tower of which fell down in around 1757. It all sits to the west of Barlings Eau, an important local landmark which we last saw some 18 months ago. Information on Langworth was a little bit hard to come by. It's not got a lot of written history. Barlings, on the other hand, has plenty. It shouldn't be confused with 3 other Barlings in Kent, East Sussex and Essex, but it does at least share the same derivation as its Essex counterpart. Both are Old English and mean bearless people. It was mentioned in the Domesday Book as Burling. Part of the parish was once a medieval deer park. I'll admit parts of this one were a struggle, but it's still a fascinating place. From the railway line to the ruined abbey, it's still unmistakably West Lindsey. We begin the parish of Barlings in Langworth at a level crossing. You won't need reminding which railway line this is if you're a regular viewer. I've waited at these crossing gates a few times in my life, but they don't go down that often. Like many other crossings we've seen locally, there used to be a railway station right next to it. Langworth Station was opened in 1848 and it closed in 1965. You've heard that one before, right? In recent times, this area was the scene of 2 accidents. In 2015, a freight train derailed near the site of the station, and in 2017, the station building was damaged when a stolen car drove through the railway barriers. The signal box here is still staffed. It acts as a central control for a number of local crossings, including the one at Reefham. Next to it all is an old pub, originally called the Crown Inn and then the Station Hotel. Now closed, it's in quite a sorry state. It was a Chinese restaurant at one point too. Okay, so I've moved up into Langworth Village proper now, away from the station. There's a few bits and bobs in between here and there, but I think the camera might have caught them earlier in the drive-in. I struggled to find a place to park. My plan was to park on Nursery Lane, which is over there, but it's a private road. I didn't know that it was a private road, but luckily, opposite Nursery Lane, there's this little lay-by on the A158, which is right outside Mountain Motor Vehicles. So this is our start point for the main walk, and we're going to end when we cross a little stream. Established in 1985, Mountain Motor Vehicles are just one of a whole host of businesses in Langworth. They supply light commercial vehicles to businesses across the county. A few paces away is Oddfellows Lane, suggesting at one time Langworth may well have had an Oddfellows Hall. If it did, it no longer stands. Station Road is a mixture when it comes to property. That's because over time, Langworth has extended outwards from a central point, which we're heading towards. Next up we have the old post office. When open, it doubled as the village shop. This closed in 2009, which sparked a protest that caused long tailbacks on the A158. Also under threat of closure is Langworth's Memorial Hall, seen here just a little bit further up the road. We'll talk some more about that in a moment, but first, let's get this formality out of the way. Mark off Barlings, everyone. There's 20 left to visit in West Lindsey. Okay, so we're going to head into the car park of the Memorial Hall, and you can see in the background there's a church, and there's also a playground as well, so there's a bit to catch in this little section, and then we'll continue walking up the road. Now, as far as I can tell, at the time of filming this was still open, but given that that was back in May, I don't know what the situation now is with this hall. It required at the time a treasurer and a new chair of committee. Hopefully it's still going, because as well as having both this play area and a small football pitch around the back, the Memorial Hall has been a hub for village events such as bingo, coffee mornings, and even the Christmas lights switch on. It would be a shame for the village to lose it. Next door is a church dedicated to St Hugh. Built between 1960 and 1962 by Haynes and Johnson of Brigg, its design was inspired by a chapel at Walmsgate Hall in East Lindsey, which was built in 1901. Inside is a plaque to Dallas York, the son of Thomas York, to whom Walmsgate Hall Chapel was a memorial. There's more to come on Walmsgate Chapel and Hall when we get further into East Lindsey. We're now heading towards that central area I spoke about earlier. Okay, so we continue up the A158. Now, Langworth is actually more than just this one street, but this is the one where most of its amenities are all laid out. Kind of annoyingly, there's no handy footpath to turn this into a circle, so unfortunately it's just a simple case of walking back again when I reach the end. We're not at the end yet though, because we've still got a ways to go. You might be able to see over there, there's a pub in the very far distance, which is beyond the end of another street which runs down towards Barlings that way. Now that's all Langworth as well, but I'll drive down that later. As I said, there's no handy footpath that would turn it into a circle for me. So when we get beyond that junction, you'll see a pub in the very far distance. That's what we're aiming for, and there's a stream there as well. That's where we stop and turn around. This is Langworth's oldest part, and on the corner of Scothan Lane is an old Wesleyan chapel. Langworth once had a small free Methodist chapel too. Next we've got a bus stop. Langworth is served by 8 different services, but your main one here is the number 56, which connects Lincoln to Horncastle. by that bus stop is an old bakery. Now, I was hoping to find out something interesting about this, but even the deepest of my digs yielded nothing. All I know though is that this whole cul-de-sac is Bakehouse Court, so I imagine when this was in business, it was a fair old size. It was a similar story for much of the village, if I'm totally honest. Langworth is really lacking when it comes to documented history. However, the next landmark kind of bucked that trend. This is the George, Langworth's one and only pub. This has been here since at least 1856, and since 2020 it's been under new management. Now, when I used to live out here, the George was a great place to go for a carvery. I don't know whether it still does a carvery or not. It's changed so much since last time I came here. I mean, for a start, what you're looking at right now is the sort of basic building that I'm used to, but if you look to your right, there's a load of new houses, and that used to be the George's car park once upon a time. It certainly isn't now. It's fair to say these new houses took me aback slightly. These are easily the newest developments in Langworth, having been completed in 2019. Just beyond the George we hit that stream. We've seen this one before. This is Barlings Eau, last seen in the Stainfield episode. It acts as a central drain for many of the becks and streams we've encountered locally, like the ones in Welton and Scothan for example. There are two bridges which cross this here in Langworth, owing to the fact that the A158 has been realigned at this point. We're stood here on its old route, which was much more bendier. The A158, by the way, is actually an old Roman road. This end of the village is where we find B. Knight & Sons. This is a traditional sawmill and woodyard which has been in business since 1874. From bespoke garden furniture to log cabins and fence panels, if it's made of wood, this is the place to be. Not a bad way to close out the main walk. Okay, now it's time for the long walk back to the beginning, at which point I'll get in the car, I'll put the camera on the dash, and we'll drive down Barlings Lane and catch whatever's down there using the car to do so. It's pointless walking down there because, as I said, there's no footpath to make it a circle for me. It will take us to Barlings, which is obviously the name of this parish. We'll have a quick look around the village, which is quite small, but the pièce de résistance is our last landmark, and that is Barlings Abbey. I'll see you there in a minute. To get to Barlings, you have to follow Barlings Lane, which runs in a southeasterly direction from Langworth. Although Barlings Lane is mainly residential, keep your eyes on the left of the screen and you'll see a lick gate-like structure. That's the entrance to Langworth Cemetery. Founded in 1899, it's the cemetery associated with the church we're about to come to in Barlings itself. Before we get there though, we have to pass Barlings Country Park. Again, keep your eyes on the left of the screen and you'll see its entrance. Barlings Country Park is a holiday park which offers space for touring caravans, and it's a good place if you're a keen angler too. It dubs itself as Lincolnshire's best kept secret. Bold claim, but who am I to judge? Also off Barlings Lane is Barlings Nature Reserve. It opened in 2019 and it's a mixture of open grassland and woodland planted by volunteers. I've included this small map of the place and its website is linked below. So Barlings is split into two bits. You've got Low Barlings, which is where the Abbey is, and we're going there at the end of this video. This area is just known as Barlings. I don't know whether it goes by High Barlings at all, but I've certainly never known it be called that. And I lived in Fiskerton, which is, you know, literally next door. And this is where you'll find the church. Let's see if this is open. The church at Barlings is dedicated to the Anglo-Saxon king St Edward the Confessor. He's usually considered the last king of the House of Wessex and ruled England from 1042 until his death in 1066. This church is sited on land that once belonged to Colesvane, Lord of Brattleby and tenant-in-chief of more than 50 manors in the county at one time. It was open, so let's have a little look inside. It features commandment boards, which have been painted directly onto its walls and are believed to be either late 18th century or early 19th. Its royal coat of arms was painted in 1739 by Edward Hunton of Lincoln. Both the church and the village of Barlings were given as part of a foundation gift to nearby Barlings Abbey when it was founded. From the back of the churchyard you can see part of the Grade 2 listed Grange farmhouse, one of 5 such listed buildings in the village. Okay, our last stop is Barlings Abbey. Now, believe this if you can, even though I lived around here for quite a while, I've never been to Barlings Abbey, so I really don't know what to expect from this. This should be fun. Let's go and find it. Right, because I've never been here before, I don't really know where to go, but I think it's just a case of following the signs. So here's an information board which tells you about the Abbey, which should come into view any moment now. Somewhere over there, not quite sure where. I was hoping to see something along these lines, but I can't see anything like that out there at the moment. It's probably there somewhere and I just can't see it. So here we go then, information point about the Abbey. There you go, that's what it looks like. It's surrounded by earthworks, as you can see from this picture. So let's go and find it. So through this gate, and I think it's just a simple case of following this path across this field. It is a public footpath, so I'm perfectly entitled to be here across this path, and it should be sort of behind those trees, I think. Let's go see. Barlings Abbey was a Premonstratensian monastery. Founded in 1154, it was a daughter house of the Abbey of St Mary and St Martial at Newsham. Its founder was Ralph de Hay, who was son of the Constable of Lincoln Castle and Lord of Burwell and Carlton. It was first established at Barlings Grange, but was soon moved to its present site. During the dissolution of the monasteries, the abbey became involved in the Lincolnshire uprisings. The abbot at the time, Matthew Mackerel, is said to have been one of the leaders of the Pilgrimage of Grace. 6 of its canons were subsequently hanged and quartered. The abbey is surrounded by a vast section of earthworks. Only these and one large chunk of its nave remain accessible to the public. Its central tower collapsed in 1757, but not before its appearance was recorded in an engraving in 1726. That is what I used as this video's thumbnail. Turns out the Viking Way actually passes through this area, and there's a quicker way to get to the abbey than the way I used, and it was to go through this gate, which is right next to the ruins, as you can see, and it actually brings you out onto a gravel drive. It belongs to these houses here. It's easier than trying to trek through the field, but you know, I didn't know that because, like I said, I'd never been here before. But I checked the map, and this will take me back down to the to where I parked the car at the other gate. So yeah, very successful that. Enjoyed that. And yeah, Barlings Abbey, a piece of history that was literally used to be right on my doorstep. I never came down here and had a look at it. And it's fabulous, isn't it? It's fabulous. You just never know what's out there, do you? You never know. You know, when you look around on the map and find these places, it's just amazing what you can come up with at times. Anyway, that's been the parish of Barlings. Time for me to move on to my next one here in West Lindsey. I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.